Hi there, this is a video about reflections. Reflections is a specific transformation, and this whole section is going to be dedicated to talking about reflections. Now remember that when we talked about reflections that we use the term mirror to talk about that, okay? So let's look at an example. Now this is my friend Jim, okay? And what I'm doing is I'm taking this specific picture of Jim to show you what a reflection is. Now, what I want to do first is develop a line of reflection, okay? So when I have this is my line of reflection, all right? And if I wanted to mirror Jim's face across this line, let's just do that real quick and let's see what we notice. And so what I've done is I've taken this face and I've reflected it over this line, all right? And what I want you to notice is how the orientation changed. I want you to notice how the side that's closest to the mirror, the side that doesn't contain an ear, is now on this side, okay? And how the ear was on the left side and now it's on the right. And that's what a mirror does, okay? And when we look into a mirror, that's what we see. Things are just backwards, okay? So what I also want to show you is how certain things are connected, all right? What I want to do is I'm going to draw a point from one eye to the corresponding eye. And when I do that and I draw a line, some specific things happen, all right? We'll call this point A, and we'll call this point after the mirror A prime. Now let's do this. Let's use his nostril here. And let's go and mirror that point over to this nostril here. We'll call this point B, and we'll call this point B prime. Now the other thing I want to do is take the middle of his mouth, all right, right there, and let's correspond it to the middle of the mouth here. All right, now my thing isn't terribly exact, but it's pretty good. We'll call that point C. We'll call this point C prime. What I want you to see here is that going from one point to its corresponding point, I've developed these three lines, okay? These lines that move across the reflection have a number of things involved, okay? One is that they are all parallel to each other, okay? The other thing I know is that they are all perpendicular to the line of reflection. The other thing I know, and let's do this, I'm going to come in here and create these points here. What the line of reflection does to this segment is that it cuts them in half, so it bisects them. So this is congruent to that, this piece is congruent to that piece, and this piece is congruent to that piece, all right? So that's what's happening in a mirror, okay? Let's talk about what this looks like on a graph. Okay, so in this problem, what I want to do is show you how to reflect over the x-axis. So I have my points here, all right, and we've got quadrilateral PQRS, okay, and we're going to reflect that over my x-axis here. So this is my line of reflection. So one thing that I've done is I've labeled all my points and written them out over here. Now, if I actually want to go through and reflect these, what I want to do is make sure that each point is reflected across this line. All right, now notice how I'm 2 tick marks, so I'm 4 units away here. So what I want to do when I make my point P prime is I want to go 4 units up directly across from that, and I'm going to call that P prime. The next thing I'm going to do is Q -7, -10, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units away. All right, so if I count up 5 units, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all right, that's Q prime, okay? And so then the next thing I want to do is do S, which is here, S prime, and that's 5 units away up here, and that's going to be R prime, all right? So I can draw my figure, and what I notice is that my image, the result of this happening is reflected over. So the distance between P and P prime, Q and Q prime, is the same across from the line of reflection, all right? So the next thing I want to do is actually write out those points that I got for P prime, all right? So P prime is the point -7, +4. Q prime becomes -7, +10. R prime now is 4, 10, and then S prime became 4 comma 4. So what I want you to see from this is what's happening from one point to the next, okay? And what we do is we're going to call this a rule, okay? So what I want to say when I write my rule is that we're doing a reflection about the x-axis, okay? And that I start with a point x comma y. After reflecting this, okay, using that rule, I then get a new point, okay? And that point I get, and notice this, that this is my point x comma y. What happens is my x value stayed the same in each of these, okay? But my y values change, okay? And here, notice how they went from -4 to +4. Notice how they went from -10 to +10. How we go from -10 to 10, -4 to 4. All right, so what happens is that the x value stays the same, so I write x, but my y value is what changes, okay? And this is the rule that we write, okay, for something being reflected across the x-axis. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is reflect this figure across the y-axis, okay? So even though this is A prime, B prime, C prime, I just want to do the reflection, okay? And so from here, what I've got is I've got A prime is the point 4, 2. So if I reflect this across my y-axis, all right, let's label this as our line of reflection. All right, so what I want to do is take this point, and I'm 2 units away from my y-axis. So I just want to move this over from my y-axis 2 units in the other direction and plot a point. All right, and we'll call that point A. All right, so then C is the same thing. It's 2 units across there, so I'm going to plot point C here. And then B is 4 units away, so I'm going to plot that here. All right, so then I have this figure that's just been mirrored from one side to the next. Okay, and what I want to do is let's list out our points for A. Okay, so A is the point -4, 2. All right, B was the point -8, -8. All right, and then C was the point -4, -8. Now, what I want you guys to see is that after we do our reflection, okay, and even though what I want you to see here is that, we'll start with A and we'll go over to A prime. So A prime is the point 4, comma 2. That B prime is the point 8, comma -8. That C prime is the point 4, comma -8. All right. So from there, what I want you to see is that you had XY values that you originally had, all right? And notice what's different. Notice how the -4 turned into a +4. Notice how -8 turned into +8. Notice how -4 turned into 4. And what I want to show you is that you end up getting the value, a new point of -x, and then the y values don't change. Those stay the same, all right? So the y values don't change. All right, so the rule that we would write for this, would be that you're doing a reflection about the y-axis, okay, from point x, y, and after you translate that or transform that and get a reflection, you get the point -x, comma y, okay, and that's what you would do. All right, the next example I want to look at is taking a figure and then reflecting it across the line y equals x, this diagonal line here, okay? So what I want to do is just write out the points that I had for E, D, and F. So point E is the point 1, comma -1. Point D is the point 2, comma -4. F is the point 5, comma 1, okay? Now, since I already have done the reflection here, we get that E prime, D prime, and F prime are also on our graph, and we're going to label those out too. So let's label the point for E prime, all right, and that's the point -1, 1. All right, the point for D prime is the point -4, 2. All right, so -4, 2. The point for F prime is going to be the point 1, 5. All right, so what I want you to see here is that once we've done you see this reflection here, All right, and you can look at the points, and you can look at the points and say, all right, where do you start with for your x value and your y value, and then what do you end up getting, and what's happening from this point to this point? What's happening from this point to this point? And what you realize is that your points here are switched, all right? 2 now is your y value, and -4 is now your x value, okay? And same thing here with 5 and 1, you switch them around and you get 1 and 5. And what you write is you write the rule y comma x, all right? So if I write the rule for reflecting across the line y equals x, I would write r for reflection and write y equals x, and I would say that you start with point xy, and after doing this reflection, your new points on your image become y comma x, okay? And also notice something here. Notice how from one point to the next, all right, all of these lines are perpendicular bisectors from our line of reflection, okay? So kind of a unique thing. All these lines are parallel. All of them are bisected by this line of reflection, okay? Now on the last example, what I want to do is show you how to use the rule to generate other points, okay? What I've been doing is I've been using the graph to either show you the reflection and then we generate the rule, but maybe the rule doesn't make sense. All right, so let's talk about this. So let me write out my rule, all right, for reflecting across the line y equals -x, and that's reflection r across the line y equals -x, and we take our point x comma y, and that's going to yield us -y -x, okay? So let me show you what I mean by this, all right? And the first thing I want to do is write out the points for A, B, and C, okay? So A is the point -4, -5, all right? So -4, -5. B is my point 1, -1. C is my point 1, -5, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write these down because reflecting across a line like this is a little tricky, all right? It's not as easy for me to do. But what I can do is I can take point A and use this concept here, use my rule. And what this rule says is that xy, this point here, I'm going to switch my x and y values and make them opposite. So A prime now is going to become the point 5, 4. All I'm doing is reading my rule and saying my xy coordinates are switched and both of them are opposite. So I put the 5 where the x is and the 4 where the y is, but then I made, since these were negative, I made these positive, all right? Same thing with B prime, all right? B prime is just going to become itself, because if I take my y value here, all right, and move it to my x position to make it opposite, it's going to stay at 1, all right? And if I take my x value, which is 1, all right, and I move it over to my y value and make it opposite, it's going to be -1. Now, the interesting thing about this point is that this is on the line of reflection. So if you reflect, if you're on the mirror, there's no reflection, all right? It just stays where it's at, okay? And then C prime, let's do that one. So C prime is going to be, let's switch our x and y. So 1 becomes our y value, and it's going to become negative. So I have -1 here. The 5 was my y value here, but I move it to my x position and make it opposite, so it's going to be +5, okay? Now, I'm just writing these points down, all right? But it's important that if I go over here to my graph, that I actually look at these points and plot them. So let's do A prime is 5, 4. So 5, 4 is here, and this is A prime. B prime stays where it's at on our line of reflection, and then C prime becomes 5, -1, so this point here, all right? And so when we draw our figure, what we can see is that this has been reflected across those values, okay? I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks a lot. Bye!